longtime friend of Launchpad Job Club, Marc Miller, Marc with a C, might be the only one you know. And he is the founder of a company called Career Pivot. He's going to be talking about dealing with change when the change was not your choice. And I believe all of you are in that category with regard to your employment. But change, it's something that is stressful for everybody. And here's why you should pay attention to Marc. As the founder of Career Pivot, which helps those in the second half of life design careers that they can grow into for the next 30 years. He also has authored the book, Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. It's in its third edition, the third edition published in September of 2019. He is also the podcast host of the award-winning Repurpose Your Career podcast. He is a recovering engineer, a multi-potentialite, and a professional career changer, as he has made 6 career pivots over the last 40 years. Marc and his wife Lotus became expats in June of 2018 when they moved to Ajijic, Mexico in June of 2023. I think I mispronounced that. I've learned it incorrectly, and Marc will correct me. In June of 2023, Lotus detected a rapid heart rate. She needed open heart surgery to replace her mitral valve. That surgery, performed in Guadalajara, Mexico in September 2023, was successful, but she suffered a major stroke that left her with paralysis in her left leg and arm. Marc stopped everything to manage her recovery. She is recovering after a lot of ups and downs that made it feel like being on a roller coaster full time. You can learn more about Marc, Career Pivot, the Repurpose Your Career podcast, and their journey to become expats by visiting the careerpivot.com website. With no more delay, let me introduce Marc. He is a longtime board member of Launchpad Job Club, a dear friend to all, Marc Miller. You are on mute. There we go.
Let me see if I can get myself.
Like the branding. Thank you, Marc.
Yes. You like the... let's see. Hold on a second. When you made me the... There we go. That's what I want. And I want everyone to turn their cameras on. Because I like to be able to... I want to be able to see people. Because I'm not going to... Unlike previously, when you've probably seen me at Launchpad, I've got PowerPoints. I have no PowerPoints today. And this is going to be a very deeply personal talk. I've had a very weird career. I am very familiar with change. I started out, graduated from college, joined IBM in 1978 to work on word processors, which I did on 2 different IBM products. As we all know, at that time, there were these things called secretaries. Within 10 years, that profession was gone. But between word processors, the IBM PC, and email, we saw a whole class of office workers disappear. And so, I spent 3 years working as a programmer. Then I went over to a test group and a project management group. And then I went over to a mechanical design group. And we were, through much of the 1980s, we were pulling engineers off drafting boards and putting them on big CAD CAM screens where they had light pens and they hit. But all we really were doing was automating the drafting process. In the late 80s, suddenly we started moving them to 3D design. And that's when I saw a number of engineers who fought it. I am not going there. Well, by the way, you lose that because it's forced. Or there were those who embraced it. And then I had a bunch of older engineers who basically said, I give up. I have spent 40 years designing in front view, side view, top view. I can't think in 3D. And they were tired. So when change is forced on you, you have three choices. You can fight it. You'll usually lose. You can embrace it, or you give up and go do something different. Well, we're seeing that happen a lot right now. We've got a lot of change going on. I went from that mechanical design group into a technical transfer group. IBM's first Unix products, I helped train the first several thousand sales and support people. It was then in Christmas of '92, I ruptured the L4, L5 disc and spent 3 months in bed. Decided not to have surgery. And I came back, and that was during the time that IBM had its near bankruptcy. So I came back to literally a different group of people. My mind was super clear, and I decided I could cross the dark side. Went over to an IBM briefing center. I went to sales, where I spent 7 years. And then I was seduced by a previous manager to go into IBM Consulting. By the way, I did one project down the street there at Easy Corp, pawn shops. Sleazy business, really sleazy. After 6 months, I said, I had enough of it. I can't do this. Went into marketing, and that's when IBM screwed me in my pension. And I gave them the single finger salute. It turned out it was the smartest move I ever made. I went to work for a successful semiconductor startup. It was then on July 11th, 2002. I was riding my bicycle with my bike club over on Westlake Drive. Came down a hill at about 25 miles an hour, turned into a blind turn where the road was cambered the wrong way, and I hit a Toyota Corolla head on. Our combined speeds exceed 50 miles an hour. I totaled the car and my bike, but not a motorbike, bicycle. Tore up a knee, broke a hip, dislocated a shoulder, broke a bunch of ribs, had imprints in the pads of the helmet in my head. And I had no internal injuries, had no brain injuries I'm willing to admit to. And they had me walking on crutches in 3 days. I was back on a bike in 10 weeks, flying back to China in 4 months. I spent 5 days in the Brac trauma center. And so one of the key things there was I flew into Guangdong province, Shenzhen, in November of 2002, which was the epicenter of SARS-V1. I get out of there training Huawei for 2 days. We headed off to Shanghai and then on to, we had no idea. And by the way, the Chinese didn't tell anybody for 2 months, but when I got back, I suddenly discovered all these people behind me got sick. You want to talk about being the wrong place at the wrong time? At that point, I laid myself off. It was about that time I went off and taught high school math for 2 years. Couldn't do that and stay healthy. That's when I found Launchpad back in 2006. And then I decided I wanted to do corporate fundraising, or I wanted to do fundraising, and I ended up working for the Jewish Community Association of Austin, developing a corporate development plan. By the way, I'm not Jewish. So being a face of a Jew, being a non-Jew, being the face of a Jewish organization is interesting. So, and from there, I figured after 6 months I wasn't going to be successful, so I planned my predecessor to Zoom, I was developing a training and certification program. So, and when I left that in 2011, I started Career Pivot. And I'm not going to go through Career Pivot, but in 2017, our health insurance had gotten so out of control. My wife and I were both self-employed. We were spending about $1,200 a month for a $15,000 deductible policy, which made no sense. That's when we decided to pick up and become expats. Now, this is where I'm going to start out with, whenever you're walking into a situation, and I've worked in 40 different countries, we get a lot of people who come decide, I'm going to go move outside the US. And the first thing you have to learn is you don't know what you do not know. Particularly when you've been unemployed for the first time. By the way, it's kind of like with teenage boys. They may be very intelligent. They are really stupid. Anybody who's raised a teenage boy can tell you that. And so one of the things is as you're walking in, you have to take away this assumption that I know something. Question everything. I'll use the example. You come down here and people go, well, I gotta have health insurance. And the answer is, not necessarily. My wife first saw an endocrinologist back in 2018. The endocrinologist spent 2 hours with her. Doctor comes down from Guadalajara once a week. And Guadalajara has state-of-the-art medical schools. I'm going to take my hat off here because I'm getting warm. By the way, the cost was $35. And people go, oh, that's the copay. No, that was the cost. So you have to admit you don't know what you don't know. And the next thing is you need to learn to what questions do I need to ask? So my wife's a retired nurse, which means she's a total pain in the ass patient. If you know, I tell all the doctors, sabe todo. My wife knows everything. By the way, most nurses and doctors are total. They're horrible patients. So my wife detected a very rapid heart rate. She thought it was her thyroid. So she schedules an appointment with her endocrinologist, which she got in 5 days. She went on a Monday. Endocrinologist immediately listens to her heart, says, I saw you in January, it wasn't sounding like this. Something's wrong. She grabs the cardiologist. The cardiologist comes in the room, does an EKG, and says, you need to come see me. That's on a Monday. On Thursday, she sees the cardiologist. 3 days. Try doing that in the US. And so he does a full sonogram on the heart and says, gave her blood thinners, says, come back and see me in 2 weeks. So she had an appointment in 2 weeks. That's when I finally got to go. And by the way, when you get your, when she got the sonogram, we got a DVD. This is one of the interesting ones. I have a portable DVD player because my computer doesn't have a DVD player in it. In fact, I don't have anything that can read a DVD anymore. And I shipped that DVD off to my son's father-in-law, who's a gastroenterologist in Houston, who then gave it to a cardiologist. And by the way, the cardiologist said all the same things that our cardiologist was saying. So I was immediately getting second opinions because I didn't know what I was doing. So Dr. Briseño, we go see him again on a Thursday. He says, okay, next thing you need to do is have a TEE, a tracheal echo something of the thing. And so we leave the appointment at 6:30 in the evening. I get a phone call from Dr. Preseno's assistant at 7:30 on Thursday night saying, you have an appointment in Guadalajara on Saturday at noon to have the TEE done. So 36 hours later. And of course, what I learned to do was ask, how much does it cost? And how can I pay for it? That's a question I've learned to ask every single damn time. And by the way, the cost was 12,000 pesos, which is about $700, and I could pay by credit card or cash. Actually, I paid it off my debit card. They actually let me be in the room when they did it. So as I'm going along, I'm learning the questions to ask. And you do that by just simply, every time you walk into a new situation, when you're done, you said, well, what should I have asked? What did I learn? And what could I have done differently? So we come back, that's been done, and we see Dr. Preseno again, and he says, okay, this is all happening, we're talking about a week apart. The following week, we meet with Dr. Preseno. He says, I'm making appointments with 2 different surgeons in Guadalajara. And I asked why these 2 surgeons. He says, because they're the best surgeons in the state of Jalisco. And by the way, they were both Dr. Fernandos. So we had Fernando 1 and Fernando 2. And by the way, you refer to all your doctors by their first name. So he made appointments for the following Thursday and Friday. And again, I asked the okay, how much does it cost? And how do they want to get paid? And both surgeons wanted to be paid in cash. One wanted 2,000 pesos, one wanted 1,000 pesos, or about $110 and $55. That's it. And by the way, they both spent an hour and a half with us. So here I am, and one of the things I had, we decided, we chose Fernando too. And one of the things he told us was, and I'd heard this from friends, that my wife would need some blood. And they would get it out of the blood bank. But normally you'd have to put the blood in before you can take it out, which means you have to go find donors. Okay? Dr. Fernando too told us, don't worry, I'll loan you, I have credit. So it's like, okay, what do I know? And then I started, and he says, you're probably going to need 4 units of blood. Turns out she needed 2 units of blood. Here's the problem. You have to do it, you have to make the donation at the hospital's blood bank. The requirements to be a blood donor, you have to be between 18 and 65, on no drugs, in near perfect health. That wipes out the entire gringo population. I ended up sending 7 people in. I got 2 units of blood out of the 7. They only got 2 got accepted. And where did they come from? They came from my Mexican bicycling community. I built a network that I didn't know I needed. You've all been told, oh, go network. Don't wait till you need it. Well, I don't have time to network. Yeah, you don't have time. You can't afford not to network. I mean, get serious. I'll tell you the one time I rode, there was a young couple here that had the Radar bicycle coffee shop. and they organized a ride up to Potrillos. And Potrillos is a 2,500 foot climb. And we did the first climb, they left me. And by the way, they were all young Mexicans. By the way, mostly young women. About half of them were young women. And as I'm crossing, we regroup at a certain point. We do the climb, and I'm cresting the last hill, coming down into Potrillos. And what do I hear? Marco, Marco, Marco. They're cheering me on. Right? I'm going, I like this. Because I'm the age of their parents. So the key thing here is build your network before you need it. And this is not necessarily professional network, personal network. Because one of the things I'm going to talk about later is you're going to really discover when we have issues, you're going to discover who your real friends are and who can really help you. So we go into the hospital. Lotus has the surgery. She has the stroke. Left me pretty devastated. And I'm in a world now that I don't know jack about. I know nothing. How do I get her home? Where can she come home? End up determining that she had to go into a nursing home. So I had two friends back here, and by the way, it's Ahihi. Could put the accents on the I, the last time. But I had two friends who scouted out some nursing homes. They had some expertise. They had experience. They gave me three. I came to Guadalajara, came home from Guadalajara on a Saturday. Sunday, I visited all three, and I chose one. And the one I chose, Costa Nostra, I basically chose because I have a bicycling buddy whose father spent the last 2 years of his life there, and he was really happy. So the second thing is, besides build your network, rely on your goddamn network. Use it. I didn't have a choice. I know nothing about this stuff. Okay. I will tell you that my mother was very old when I was born. She was almost 40. So if I'm 68, my mom would be 107 now, if she was alive today. I took care of my mother the last 5 years of her life. Taking care of a spouse is 10 times harder than taking care of your parents. A lot of people told me that. It's true. So rely on your network. The next thing is you need to ask the right people. So who are the right people? That's where you keep asking people until you eventually find them. It's persistence. I eventually found out that the woman who ran Costa Nostra was super well connected. We eventually got connected with an internal medicine doctor, Dr. Ana Gabriela. And by the way, it's Doctora Ana, it's not Doctora Ana, and it's Doctora Ana Gabriela, because in the practice, there are two Dr. Anas. And I literally send her a WhatsApp message every single morning, how well my wife slept, and give her an update. She doesn't communicate with me every day. But to know that, in fact, the one day my wife ended up having urinary tract infection and just went berserk. I called her, and then, we ended up having a conversation within a half an hour. And I actually talked to my wife's doctor, not to their, if for those of you who remember Wayne's World, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. I bless her every single day of the week. So finding what you need, finding the right people, right? You have Kathy, you have Charles Black, you've got a bunch of folks at Launchpad. You got Catherine, by the way. Hi, Catherine. I haven't seen you in a long time. You have a lot of people. Rely on them. They're the people. One of the things that we become, I have learned through this experience. I have learned to be humble. I'm in a world where I don't know crap. As I've told a number of the doctors, I've worked on really complex technologies. I've been through 2 successful exits. And I can tell you that this stuff is way above my pay grade. So the next thing I want to talk about is when all this happened, I shut Career Pivot down. I had an online community. I turned it off. One of the things I want you to think about is what things do you need to stop doing? This is an excellent time. There's a great book, or a whole book series by Richard Leidner called Repacking Your Bags. And one of the things he talks about is there are times in your life where you need to unpack your bags. What things are not serving you anymore? Get rid of them and then repack. Because we accumulate stuff. Behavior, it's not just physical stuff, it's behaviors, it's organizations, it's stuff that doesn't, how many of you have online subscriptions that you don't use? But so be ready to drop stuff. We moved Lotus to a place called Casa Nostra. She was there. We were progressing through the end of the year, and then we had a problem in January where she wasn't sleeping, was being combative with the nurses, and the psychiatrist, much to our knowledge, was she over-medicated her on antidepressants, and she turned into a zombie. And through the month of January, her physical therapy sessions were going nowhere. I finally sat down with, I tried to arrange a meeting with Dr. Anna Gabi, and the psychiatrist didn't show up. Pissed me off. And that's when Dr. Anna Gabi sat me down and said, it's time to bring Lotus home. And my first response is, I can do that? I didn't have a clue. Not a clue that that was an option. So again, who do you rely on? She gave me 2 names. Who I then contacted that afternoon. I had appointments the next day with the two very nice ladies who ran small nursing services. I ended up choosing Claudia. And by the way, I pay 110 pesos an hour for nurses. That's about $6.50 an hour. I can afford that. That's 24-hour nursing service. It's not perfect. A lot of nurses don't speak a lot of English, but with translator apps now, and she's home. So again, it's one of those things that I didn't know what was possible. And so again, as you get into this journey, what questions are you going to ask? Who are you going to ask on? Who are you going to rely on? I have a chapter in my book on what I call MSU disorder. And MSU stands for make stuff up. And by the way, you can take stuff and replace it with a 4-letter Germanic word. And the reality is, whenever we have a void in our knowledge, rather than going asking, we tend to make stuff up. And anyone who says they don't do that is lying. Okay? So it's one of these deals about you have to understand that where is there a void in my knowledge? And don't make stuff up. So I'll use the class example. In October, my wife had a bunch of respiratory problems, and Dahlia, who owns the Casa Nostra, convinced us that we really ought to go see this internal medicine doctor, and we ought to go back to the hospital and just get it taken care of. And so we do that, and Dr. Manzana, who's a great guy, he goes back and looks at the CAT scan done on the night of the surgery. And then he says, there's something there. So he does another CAT scan. And he says, there's something in there. There's a tumor in there. What is, I don't know. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, and my son and daughter-in-law are now with me. And he arranged for a neurosurgeon to come visit us about 4 o'clock. So between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock, I had a huge void in my knowledge. I could have gone down a rat hole. And by the way, we've all done this, right? You either horrify about it, and I made the conscious effort not to say, I don't know what this is. The neurosurgeon shows up about 4 o'clock. Real nice guy, says, I'm going to go over to the x-ray room. I'll call you in about 20 minutes after I looked at it, and then you can come on. We'll call you and you can come on over. So he does, and we sit down with him, and he explains the fact that it's where it is and what it is. It's very likely a benign tumor. Just don't mess with it right now. And by the way, you probably can't operate on it. We have since gone talk to a gamma knife specialist so they can irradiate it. Turns out these things are way more common than I ever thought. I've met half a dozen people who've had these tumors in their brains, these benign tumors. They grow for long periods of time. And so I was, when he told us that, it was like, oh. But the fact was, I had not gone down the rat hole of this is cancer, this is something she's going to die, which should have been super easy to do. One of the things is after we moved her home, I've got a set of WhatsApp groups. I've got a WhatsApp group with my very close friends. One of them is Ann Taylor, who Kathy knows, and Steve Taylor, who moved down here. And that's my small little close-knit group. I'm like most guys, I have very few close friends. My wife has a very, very wide, much larger friends network. Well, I can tell you a lot of her friends disappeared. I cannot tell you how disappointed I am in some of these people. She ran a card playing group and nothing. Even when I go ask, I get nothing. Now, number one, what happened to my wife scared the shit out of them. Because this can happen to anybody. You know, this all started a year ago and we had no idea. So you're going to discover who your friends really are. It's usually in these situations, but it also reinforced to me what it means to be a friend to someone else. So when you have people who need your help, think about that. I will tell you, I have been humbled so many times that, you know, I've had the number of times where things have been shoved in my face that say, I don't know what I'm doing. By the way, for most of us who had very successful professional careers, that's demoralizing. I have learned to accept it. And because of that, by the way, you're going to get a lot more out of the help that people do give you. The one thing I've learned going through, the other thing I've learned going through all this is I have to be incredibly agile. I have a plan A, and then a plan B, and then a plan C, and then a plan D, and then I may have to go back to plan B, which means I may have to go back to plan A, which means I may have to go back to plan C. And I've learned the fact that, okay, that's okay. For most of us, that's pretty disruptive. And one of the things that goes along with that is learning to manage my own emotions. Now, I will tell you, 9 months ago, I probably had, you would have never seen me cry. Now I cry all the time. I won't say I cry all the time. I cry. And one of the interesting ones I've noticed is how people react to it. Because I've had friends who say, "Oh, don't cry." Well, it's not about me, it's about them. It's how it makes them feel. So in one of the, I'll use the class example. In December, my wife literally collapsed. Her sodium levels went super low. So they put her in the hospital, and they gave her a whole bunch of sodium. And this is related to a condition she had long before the stroke. And so she spent the night in the hospital. Next day, she comes out. She's top of the game. She's alert. She's cognizant. Mentally, she's there. We bring her back to Casa Nostra. She's flirting with one of the male nursing students. Right? She's great. Sunday morning, I go in, and she's hallucinating out. She has urinary tract infection. And for those who are not familiar with UTIs, hallucinations, she was hallucinating big time. Well, I had gotten so high on the fact that I finally had my wife back, and then to go crash. So there are times in which in your career where you think you got the job. Moderate it, man. Because until you get that first, I think Kathy says second paycheck, you don't have it. And I've really learned to simply manage those emotions. And, I'm going through that right now. I mean, my wife, on May 8th, we went into Guadalajara to see a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist completely redid all my wife's psychiatric meds. She suddenly started to sleep. My wife now is probably 90% back mentally, and everything fell in place. And then these last week or so, she's plateaued. In fact, she probably regressed a little bit this last week. Is learning not to go up and then come back down. Keep those emotions at an even keel. And the last is, I'll finish up with this, is take care of yourself. In the first 3 months, I was so busy, I wasn't eating. I lost 10 pounds. I'm 6'2" and I was 175 pounds. I don't have the weight to lose. My riding my bicycle is my therapy. I've started seeing a psychologist. Do whatever you have to take care of your own mental and physical well-being. Eating right, sleeping. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've talked to people and they ask me, how am I doing? And I talk about my wife. And they say, no. How are you doing? And it's very difficult to talk about. So this is a marathon. My wife's left arm is coming back. Her left leg is not coming back as there's still certain muscle groups that aren't firing. I've got two different physical therapists we're working with. They work very differently. She gets acupuncture. She gets chiropractic adjustments. And by the way, all of this I can afford. I'm one of these people who worried about money my entire life. And I'm spending that money now. And that's okay. So I have not been monitoring the chat group. Any questions, thoughts? Does any of this resonate with you?
There have been quite a few comments in the chat where people have appreciated what you've shared. I made notes about what I got were 8 lessons that you've learned that are applicable to the job search process, and I'm in the process of putting them in chat right now. Anybody that wants to unmute and talk to everybody directly about questions, comments, concerns. We've advised everybody to look at your website and check out as many of your podcasts as they can, because they are all chock full of really, really, really good information.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm going to do is my online community is gone. I will probably sell the Career Pivot. It's gone. I will very likely bring back the podcast. I've had 337 episodes. And the primary reason is I met so many cool people. It's the greatest networking tool I ever had. You do 100 episodes and boy, people come out of the woodworks. I've had more New York Times bestsellers on my podcast. And, you know, by the way, most of these people are really nice people. Not all of them, but most of them. So what else?
If I could, I just wanted to make a comment. You had mentioned the book Repacking Your Bags.
Yeah.
And I became aware of that book way back in 93 or so.
Yeah.
And I read the book because it was by an advertising duo that were in a rival advertising agency. And I really wanted to know what these two guys had to say. And I was so inspired by that book that I left Des Moines, Iowa, and moved to Austin, Texas.
Oh,
And, started my own business. And I just can't say enough about the tools that are in that book.
Yeah.
One of them is to send postcards to yourself. And it's just, it is very inspiring because these two advertising guys decided to chuck it all because it was so stressful and do something different. And so I just wanted to mention that and also tell you, Mark, I went through all these stages that you talked about last week when my husband had his first arterial fibrillation.
Yep.
And the point that really stuck with me is to manage your emotions and remember that you don't know. And because my emotions were going down the rabbit hole, like you said, and the more I learned, by the way, I went out to my network and I talked to people about AFib, and I found all kinds of people in my life who knew about it because of family members. And so I just can't recommend that enough, is that you talk to your network about the struggles you're having, because chances are they have great ideas for you. And, my friends educated me and made me feel more at peace than any of the medical people I talked to. It really did help to hear from people who had experienced the same thing. And I know that's the case with job seeking. You can go down terrible rabbit holes, but if you're talking to people, you'll find that people recover, and you can find out how they did it. So I just really appreciate your sharing with us so much.
Well,
Roxanne has raised her hand.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to say thanks to everyone who has shared their experiences in chat. And Mark, I do have a question for you. How have all of your experiences over the past year changed you? And I'm talking about both moving to Mexico and what has happened to your wife.
well, and by the way, hello, Roxanne. And we haven't seen each other in a long time. Out of both my ruptured disc and my bike accident, I came back a better person. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. The lessons I've learned about friendships, the lessons I've learned about to rely on other people and trust them. I am way more humble than I was a year ago. So Roxanne, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your answer and your help. Your presentation today has been challenging and educational.
I mean, because when Shannon approached me about, would I be willing to talk? And I said, yeah, this is a perfect topic because we all go through a gazillion issues. And this has not been a fun experience. And for most of you, when doing your unemployment stuff, it's not a fun experience. So Matthew Roberts raised his hand.
Hey, Mark, it's really good to see you. Sorry I've lost a little bit of touch there, but I'm really appreciating your story. It occurs to me to add something from my own experience in the last few months. My mother very rapidly went into dementia, and there's some improvement coming, but what it has taught me in terms of planning in life is that I think we often, we have our attorneys and such, and we often focus on what will we do when our husband, loved one, whomever dies, and having all the legal stuff in place, but not so much about what do you do if they become incapacitated. What if you're in this middle place where you're having to make good decisions, caring decisions, and managing all the logistics of this? And so it has me thinking, for one, it ought to be part of what attorneys or whoever recommend that you do. And that I want to make sure that as I do my own planning, that I bring into this, it's not going to be just if I die. It's just like, well, what happened if I end up like my mom?
Yep. Well, 20 some odd years ago, when I had my mother, and my mother fell, broke a bunch of stuff, and I was responsible. But oh, by the way, the medical power of attorney and the advance directive and all that was in my brother's name. And my mother was rapidly slipping into dementia. And it's like, I didn't know I needed to do this. So I got a DVD with a CD with forms on it, and got someone to, while she could still make an X, and got a friend to come in, a neighbor come in, and and not notarize it, but co-sign it. So, but this is one of those things that even now, what are you gonna do when you get laid off? Do you have your financial under control? Again, have you been networking? Who can you depend on? It's all the same stuff.
Mark, along those lines, I'd just like to add that I know that job seekers feel like they get ghosted a lot by recruiters. And I just want to tell you guys, it's not you, it's them.
Yeah.
They are so busy. They are answering to maybe 5 hiring managers and having to fill like 50 roles. And so when they love on you and say, "Oh my gosh, I think I can get you in next week for an interview," and so many of you have come back to me, I haven't heard back from them. What do I do? I'm like, just reach out, and if they don't respond, try to move on because they found somebody who's a little bit more of a unicorn than you. And I know it is so hard to take because you've invested yourself into that interview. However, if you are networking and you are doing the things that you need to be doing and you've got so many irons in the fire, you're not putting all your eggs in that one basket. You're then going, okay, that was a hit, but I'm going to move on. So that's just my advice when it comes to getting ghosted by recruiters.
Well, I'm reading the chat box here. When my wife was seriously ill a couple years ago, learned that our friends and family were our most important resource. It turns out I have a cousin who is a PhD nurse specialized in geriatrics, where it reminded me when my dad was dying, our friends brought us food. Yep, you're really gonna find out who really. I mean, I have a woman, Anna, Mexican lady who I rode bikes with like 3 times, and she was on my list for blood donors. And when we were going into the hospital, she came in, brought coffee for us, did all kinds of stuff that, I mean, it was, the kindness was very, when you really need it. So